The Excellent Conversation, a podcast about teaching, learning, and anything else that pops into Wes and Amie's heads.
One of my favorite things about this podcast is that we never really know how to start, how we're starting. You know what I mean? We just
That's
kind
because
of
we're professionals. That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's not why. No, that's completely wrong. We're just kind of getting into it. There's a buddy of mine who's big into, oh God, I'm going to get the name wrong. It's not kite surfing. It's not wing boarding. It's not surf winging. It's some combination of words that involves all kinds of crazy acrobatics out on the open water, and I don't know what it is. Wingboard, surf warning. I don't know what
I can't help you.
Yeah, no, I don't know what it is. But it's the same kind of thing of just like, he gets out there and it starts when it starts, and like you never know when something interesting's going to happen. And
yeah.
That's all good.
I like that. It's a little freestyle, but I was just thinking about the fact that men, and it's not, I love making these generalizations that don't hold, but men have all these like expensive hobbies.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like wing boarding or whatever it's called.
Winging. Surfing.
And I think the reason that they have them is because like they've got to spend their money somewhere. Women have to pay for their makeup, their hair products. It's like the difference is absurd. It's hilarious. Having lived both lifestyles, it's like getting ready for something like as a man versus getting ready for something as a woman is like hilariously different. And there's just a lot more investment that's required for the woman. And so the men have all this extra money and they're like, you know what? Let's build a board that like elevates me like 4 feet above the surface of the water.
Sure.
And we'll do that all day.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're onto something. It's one of the most attractive qualities. Well, my wife has many attractive qualities to me, but one of them is that she does not typically wear makeup. Not because, like makeup's pleasing, whatever, but just because I choose to interpret that as a pushback against that sort of cultural force. Which I find very endearing and which resonates with me. So, I don't know.
While we're on the makeup topic, because we haven't paid nearly enough attention to makeup, I would say, over the history of this podcast. I'm
not making
true.
up any ground right now. So
this is true that if men are presented with images of women not in makeup, in light makeup and in like heavy makeup, they see the woman in no makeup and think that she looks sickly. The woman in light makeup and say that she's in no makeup, and the woman in heavy makeup and say that she's garish. So basically, like it's really, really hard. Does it sound like it? I mean,
wow.
Yeah. So I wear light makeup.
I feel like some of the women in my environment have in some sense trained us to expect them to be a certain way. Like when my wife wears makeup, like it's nice, but it looks strange. And there are people for whom if I see them without makeup, it looks strange.
Isn't that interesting? I completely agree with you. And like, I find that people perceive me differently depending on the level of makeup that I'm wearing. And in fact, I like my sort of like femininity is perceived differently based on that. And, it's funny because like I've been in the process over the last 3 years of like, expressing myself through like my feminine energy and feminine side. And so there's been learning to do and discovery to do. And like,
sure. I
have sort of like a natural-ish, like a way of putting myself together that feels natural, But I still have some flexibility too, and I still try other things. And it's just funny when like suddenly I put on a little bit more makeup, and then suddenly everyone's like looking at me. You know what I mean? And it's not because it's bad, but just because it just shows a different angle, a different side. It's funny. So I'm way overly self-conscious about all this stuff. You know what I mean? To a degree that it's not that helpful. But it's interesting. Definitely
it is interesting.
Like a very, yeah.
I know for me the same is or something that sounds the same is true of clothes. I very rarely wear anything different. Yeah, like I just wear the same thing all the damn time, right?
Right.
Which is a a common complaint among many people. Is that's anyway. But when there is occasion for me to dress up, it really does feel like, oh, all right, that's a different. I don't want to say a different person, but really the presentation is different enough that it does it makes an impression for sure.
It's funny too that those symbolic changes, like those aesthetic changes, like how much power they carry, like how much of an announcement they make. You know what I mean? It's like, and it's still just clothing. It just has like a little bow tie, and like these shiny shoes, and that's it. That's still shoes. Just these shoes are shiny. It's like,
yep. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. So we were talking the other day about how we might talk about achievement.
Yeah.
Please.
Oh, well, okay. So this is great. I'm gonna make the segue from the other like screw around topic that I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
And this is gonna get us into
great.
Our actual topic, which is the price of achievement.
Price of achievement. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we can even talk about that title because there's something interesting there too. But the thing I was thinking about with regard to femininity and achievement and expression is Barbie. Because have you seen it, Wes? I'm looking at you and it looks like you have not seen it.
No, I haven't seen it yet. And it's so fun because I was so psyched to see it and of course Oppenheimer. And I haven't seen either. I haven't seen a movie
They're both
in the theater
great.
in I don't know how long it's been. It's been a long time.
I get that too. Oppenheimer is a better movie, frankly, I'll be honest, but Barbie's so important and so it's so of the moment. But
totally.
one interesting thing that happens right at the beginning, like before the Barbie world is disrupted, is that like the Barbies live every day in a state of perfect achievement, where like there's a Nobel Prize winner, and there are doctors and scientists and astronauts and just all these Barbies who are like so accomplished, like they're the president, they're the Supreme Court, and they're like they're all doing these beautiful things, and they live comfortably with it. And that's kind of the cool thing, is that there's no discomfort, there's no apologizing for it, but it's also this sort of like fake ideal world too, because they're like manufactured to be the president, there is the one that's the president, and they don't really hold elections. So no one's ever unhappy. So even if they did hold an election, she would still win. So it's just kind of an interesting, like, I think that's kind of the fundamental problem within not of the movie, but like within the movie, is that you can't live that perfectly. You know what I mean? And as soon as like a challenge comes up, as soon as there's a doubt of any kind, then the amount of like wrestling and wrangling that you've got to do to like make the world make sense again is like impossible.
Are you talking about the kind of discomfort that comes from people vying to hold a single position, like the competition of?
That could be one example. Absolutely, that's and I don't think there really is any competition. Like among the Kens, there is actually, and that's kind of interesting because at the beginning, throughout the movie, the Kens are in competition with each other because all they want is Barbie. Like they don't really have they don't really have accomplishments. They're just like good-looking men who are like, next to near Barbie.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas Barbie has all these titles, all these jobs. There is no competition among the Barbies. So yeah, that's absolutely one of the glitches. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how does that relate for you to the idea of achievement? What I'm hearing is that achievement is a thing that we work for in order to attain a thing that is a requirement for contentedness or happiness. I mean, I've really packed a lot of.
I was about to say that's
pretty hard there, so we can. Yeah, maybe we want to pick that apart and.
I could write a paper about that sentence if you'd like.
Yeah.
I would say like 8 to 10 pages, no problem.
So, I mean, pick any part of that and poke at it, or maybe, reframe it entirely and redirect us or whatever you think. But that one of the reasons that I was so excited that I am so excited to talk about this is that it's kind of a slippery fish because it's loaded, right? Because it's a thing that has been sort of baked into the psyches of many of us. I'm certainly no exception, right? Achievement has been a loaded word, ever since I could say it.
I don't know if I'm jumping to the end of this story too soon.
What the hey? They can always fast forward for the middle of the story.
I know. I'm a decent writer, but I'm not that great at structure. So, no, I think that the most important question and the one that often goes unanswered is why we're trying to achieve. And that was what I heard at the end of your kind of claim about achievement is that, in pursuit of contentedness, it's like, I don't think that's what most people are after.
No.
I don't think that most people know what they're after. You know what I mean? I think that most people are seeking achievement for achievement's sake,
Even that feels a little loaded to me. I mean, that seems like a more sensible approach. I am doing this thing for the love of it, is what I hear when you say for achievement's sake.
I wouldn't say in the situations I'm thinking of, I wouldn't say it's for the love of it.
You mean for the bragging rights?
Yeah, and it's even more unconscious than that.
Okay.
It's kind of for the bragging rights, but like before that, it's this is what success looks like, therefore we imitate it. It's like making money because you've been told that's a good thing to do, versus making money because you know what you want to do with the money when you have it. And that's really common too.
For sure.
Mistaking money as like a goal of itself. So, I had a conversation the other day. I've had this conversation dozens of times. I don't know, maybe 100 times.
You got to go out drinking with some different people. Oh, with a parent. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, this is on the clock.
I got it.
With a student's mother, and she's, the kid's lovely, the mother's lovely, she's working hard. We're doing everything right in terms of the process. The mother has the goal of the kid going to an Ivy League school, and that goal is disjointed, like literally separated from the parents' awareness of the kid's emotional self, intellectual self, interests. You know what I mean? It's traveling separately. And
it's traveling separately. Wait a minute. Can we just pause on that for a second? Because that really that hit me in a very tender spot that I think. Okay, go on. Traveling separately.
And I can relate to that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I can totally and I think having a reason, having any ambition of any kind is useful. But I think that I don't know. I don't know. I should be careful to say that because I'm not sure if it's always inherently useful. But it's just interesting because it's hard. It's hard if it is separate, and we're trying to have a conversation about how do you make this happen? We're leaving out the whole chunk of why are we making this happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't think contentedness is part of that story. I don't think seeking, unless your contentedness comes from sending your kid to an Ivy League school, in which case, great.
Well, I think about, I think for me, going to, a well-known and well-regarded school was in part intended to shield me from all the inchoate bad outcomes that could befall those who didn't take that route, right? And it was just sort of this, shadowy specter, which is a very useful tool, if you find yourself at 14 not really knowing what it is you want because you're 14, that's pretty reasonable, right? And and it's clear to the people around you that you're embedded in a system where what you do at 14 will affect some of the things that happen to you at 16, which in turn will be meaningful inputs into the great sorting that happens at 18, that in turn will affect your 20s, probably throughout your 20s. It's not to say that it'll determine your life, but it will launch you in a particular direction, and it'll take a lot more energy later to redirect if it turns out to be the wrong direction.
That's a nice way to say it. The great sorting. God, that's so interesting. Yeah. It's funny because we look at like the sorting hat from
Right.
JK.
Yeah,
Can't say her full name out loud anymore.
By the way, I've read some debunking of some of the horrible things that I read about that particular author early on. And at this point, I don't know kind of what the story is, but it was a really, I read a debunking article, I think it was in the Atlantic or the New Yorker or something. And it was really quite striking to me, the degree to which, I'd like to be able to say, well, now that I'm older and I have better critical reasoning skills, I have to take everything with a grain of salt. But I think it'd be a lot more authentic to say that you just don't know who to trust anymore. Like, it's just much harder to understand. Anyway, sorry, that's total tangent. But I just, oh Lord.
She has produced work that is like, and made comments that are like distinctly anti-trans. Distinct.
Oh, is that true? Okay. See, I didn't really. You're following this better than I am, I'm sure.
Yeah. And
Okay.
it's from her fingers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
it's really not nice.
Okay.
It's accusing people of me of things that I've never done, would never dream of doing, and that's like way beyond the pale. You know what I mean? It's like way. Yeah.
Got it.
Unkind. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, she had a sorting hat. Also, like the sorting happens I think it happens in Hunger Games too. Like that stuff's based on the college process. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not some happy coincidence. It's like, oh no. Like this is a major part of our like cultural psyche. Mm-hmm. And so then we mythologize it because you have to mythologize something that you can recognize. Mm-hmm. So that's really interesting, Wes. I like that. Yeah, I mean, rich. It's rich. It's richer than I thought it was. Cue me up. Give me some more good thoughts, Wes.
Sure, I'm happy to. So I think there are a couple of different ways that we can go here, and we might wind up touching on all of them. But one thing that I want to bring into the conversation is an all too common theme that I hear all the time from parents and kids, usually under a couple layers of self-deception. And I say that kindly, like it's not like I'm immune to, like it happened. I do the same thing to myself, right? I'm not, trying to cast aspersions or whatever. But there is this deep sense among so many of us that that you can have it all, that if you just work a little harder, then, you can get to this blah, 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 blah. And it's been really interesting to me, very eye-opening over the last 5 or 10 years, as the pressure cooker of high school has really been turned up, and as I've become exposed increasingly to the, the sort of highest pressure of the pressure cookers, right? So I'm kind of watching it get worse, in part because it's getting worse, and in part because my attention is moving more and more to the places where it's always been quite bad, right? But what I'm seeing is that there are a lot of people who simply attempt to add to the list of things that they can say they've done. And then there are the people who have chosen the core skills that they're going to be really good at that apply across a number of things. Okay, and the first category, generally speaking, is just keeping like insanity at bay at arm's length. And the second group appears to be just sort of sailing into where they want to go. Okay?
Yeah.
It's the difference between, okay, now I'm going to do Model UN, and now I'm going to play lacrosse, and now I'm going to do this, and here's my GPA to the 4th decimal place, versus, okay, here's what I'm in the middle of doing now, and I'm on top of it, because being on top of things is the thing that I've chosen for myself. I'm thinking of one student in particular, like, very bright student, but had a note-taking system that he'd clearly developed over years that was very comfortable for him. Had a meditative practice that was meaningful for him. actually made time in every day to sort of to read his notes and annotate them. And it's like, oh, those are like, that kind of habit making is going to beat the kid who's even smarter, but doesn't have those skills by a country mile. I know it sounds like I'm veering off track, but my point here is that to try to collect all these different awards, right, in order to fill a medal wall or something, I think is not as, it's just not as wise a goal in most cases as being the sort of person who cultivates his or her own strengths, who has some idea of what they are, who has some mindfulness around avoiding one's weaknesses or ameliorating them in some way, and who, when they want to lean into a passion, has some sense about how to corral their own best qualities to help them achieve that thing.
Yeah. No, I think that's. I'm thinking about when people will like in an attempt to get into college, write a book. As one example.
Sure.
And the reason you do that is it like, as a headline, it looks great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and she wrote a book.
Yeah.
Very cool. But why you do that, why you write the book, the reasons for that vary. And there's a really cynical take on that. There's a really cynical way to write a book. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Where basically like, you're only doing it to pad your resume. You have no interest, like, you're not planning on continuing it. And what's funny is a lot of people do that throughout their lives.
Sure.
College professors will they'll like publish or perish in order to try to get tenure.
Right.
Tenure, by the way, is a thing that used to exist.
I've heard of tenure.
I think like our generations were like the last ones to like get tenure, basically.
Well, to have it be meaningful in the way that it was.
Yeah, exactly. But then as soon as they get the tenure, then they stop publishing. You know what I mean? Which is so interesting. And it's like, what? Okay, were you doing it for the love or were you doing it for the job security? Because I've always had a problem with that. I've always had like thought that it was like, inauthentic to, make an album of music just to get into college. Make an album of music because you love music, because you have to.
Well, but I mean, let's recognize it for the grayscale proposition that it is, right? So, why did I write a book? I wrote a book in part because I wanted to be someone who had written a book, because I knew that it would give me cachet. I knew that people would take me more seriously. I mean, that's just straight up, right? And to be fair, there's a certain authenticity around the idea that I didn't try to write a book until I had a book's worth of stuff to say. You know what I mean? Like, I remember getting very early in my career, I got from a person I respect very deeply to this day. He said, the thing you ought to do is write a book, because then blah, 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 right? And it was, 12, 15 years before I actually wrote a book. Because at the beginning, it just wouldn't have been, it's, I'm not saying that my book is the thing you got to read or anything like that, but it's like,
I like your book.
Yeah, I mean, it's right. It was worth reading for a lot of people, I think, and it made me think really hard to write it. And there's no way I would have gotten those benefits early on, and there's no way anyone else would have gotten any benefits from reading the whatever I would have said. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I mean,
I hear what you're saying in terms of that continuum. I mean, I don't know. I feel like you earned it. I mean, I think that there are people who are writing books via Chat GPT right now.
That's true. That's true. And I appreciate that thought. And I'll also say that writing a book was every bit as unpleasant as they promised me it would be, and I would absolutely go back and do it again. Like it was. What am I trying to say? It was work worth doing. It wasn't easy. It wasn't enjoyable in the way I normally think of it, but it was enjoyable in the way that like learning a new hobby is enjoyable, where you suck at the beginning and it's nothing but frustrating, right? That's still, that's a kind of, grappling with that sort of thing feels a special kind of good.
Absolutely. And that reminds me of like, it's like puzzle solving,
Yeah.
and, you and I talked about this before for sure, where basically like you want to find puzzles of a difficulty where it's like, you don't want it to be too easy and it can't be impossible. You know what I mean? And some people like close to impossible, and some people like, it depends on the day of the week, like how hard the crossword puzzle is. And some days I'm in the mood for a Monday, and more days I'm in the mood for a Friday or Saturday,
Sure.
but it's, it just depends on like, you want it to be hard enough to be worth doing.
Yeah.
That to
You
me
want it to be a
is
whetstone for your mind, right? Like you want to finish it and
Exactly.
feel like, okay, I'm better for having done this.
And if we're skill building, if part of the process of writing a book to get into college, you know what I mean, to get sorted into the better sorting hat,
Hufflepuff!
is
Sorry. All right, fine. I'm sorry.
you can
I
hey
don't
no you
I'm totally just spouting off. Go.
I think I'm well real quick aside, I feel like I think I'm probably Gryffindor. I think I am,
That seems right to me.
Oh no, why am I talking about this person's work?
All right, I'm sorry. You know what? We can talk about
No,
the
that's
work.
not you. That's not on you.
No,
That's on me.
I follow.
Yeah.
I follow. We're coming back to. I'm sorry for the digression.
But I'm not Ravensclaw. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That's like even though those are like the smart kids. You know what I mean? Like that's not my.
Not
It's
your bag.
not quite me. No, it's not. That's not what represents me. You
Yeah.
know. Anyway, this like skills and like, creating, and finishing a project is an amazing skill. With so much application for a lifetime, and I think that's wonderful. And I think that's like an amazing like, intention and like reason to reward kids for having written a book, you know what I mean? For having started a charity or something like that. You know
Oh,
what I
I
mean?
see what you mean. Yeah, you actually did the thing.
It's not the book itself, it's the making of the book.
The thing
It's the finishing of the book.
Yeah. The thing I expected us to really get into that we haven't landed on, and maybe it's because
Yeah.
it's the wrong thing, is the notion that if you choose to do this thing, you are necessarily choosing not to do all the other things. And that the people who sort of move from one thing to another to another to another are sacrificing, among other things, depth, right? And like, everything's a sacrifice, right? But no, I guess it really is about the thing that you're talking about. If you pursue this thing for someone else's agenda, then you are necessarily not only sacrificing your own agenda, but you're depriving yourself of the opportunity to face the fact that you as a 17-year-old, in the case of college applicant, don't yet know what your agenda is, which is scary. But like,
Yeah.
you don't know what your agenda is, so you may as well face it. Like, what the heck?
Yeah. I mean, it's like living your life as like a really well-trained circus animal. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
someone told you at some point you need to, be the person with the published book, and you're like, okay, arf, I will do it.
Right.
So yeah, that's interesting. That is problematic to me.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, one thing that's problematic to me is that the sorting happens at age 17 or 18.
Yeah,
Like, that's
for sure.
really early.
Yeah.
I always tell my students' parents, because it's true. It's like, 5 years ago your kid was 12. They're properly
Yeah.
children. So we just expect a lot so quickly.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, be a child. Okay, now write a book.
Which actually raises another point. If our sorting happens so early, doesn't that imply that what we're actually doing is sorting not the individual, but the family structure in which they've lived for the last 15 years? And indeed, right, we've seen that that's what's really happening, right? We're admitting, a family to one of these spots because, of course, the kid is never getting in on his or her own merits in the sense that the sorting hat would have us think of it, but rather, the product of all the resources that the family has been able to muster in service of that goal.
Even when the family doesn't have resources, that still affects the kid. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
no kid grows up in isolation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's just not how humanity works.
Yeah, of
But
course.
like, even if you don't have a supportive family, that informs, how you show up at college.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you're right. It's like the family is absolutely a marker. Like it is the thing, is the entity. Yeah.
Do you think that the price of achievement is a topic that maybe? Do you think it's worth turning on adults like us as well? Do you think that there's I personally feel that for myself, I continually pay the price for achievement, and I continue to feel the echoes of what I felt as an obligation to achieve earlier in my life. And I feel like everything is always a reaction to that or a counter reaction to my reaction to that. Like it's difficult to be in a place where I can just say, okay, what am I doing and why am I doing it? Oh, I am doing this for this reason, and it feels unencumbered by all that. Instead, it always is informed by this ever increasing freneticness that seems to infuse certainly our work careers as tutors, but the rest of our regular lives too, I think.
So 2 questions. So first, what's the price? What's an example of the price you feel like you continue to pay? I believe you, but I want a little more specifics.
Sure. Well, I think the easiest, the thing that I imagine you can probably most easily relate to is, I remember.
Oh.
What?
Hey, I just lost you, Wes. Okay.
You lost
I lost
me?
you for a couple of seconds.
I'm
Yeah.
gone?
Only for I would say 2.5 seconds. So you can look back at the podcast and see like my eyes go dead for about 2.5 seconds.
I feel like I
no, now you're gone
never
again.
moved.
Yeah.
I feel like I've been here the whole time.
I believe that you were. I just couldn't.
Was I in a pocket dimension? Was I actually bereft of connection? Okay, fair enough.
Maybe. No, I mean, I don't. That part I can't speak to. Yeah.
Okay. I think a thing that you can probably relate to is there was a time in your life when you went on a walk in a forest and you had a few hours to kill and there was really nothing to do. And so you just went on a walk and saw some trees and got a little bored. Surely that's a thing you've done at some point, right? You sat on a beach and got a sunburn for a few hours, whatever it was. Okay. Mm-hmm. My normal day-to-day is that the 24 hours that I have are simply not enough. Now, you and I both know that that's sort of a fictional friction that happens when my expectations aren't well calibrated to the actual world I live in, right? But it's a little frustrating to feel like, geez, I've been doing this for a while now, this whole thing called life, right? And you'd think I'd be better at realigning my expectation with the actual, environment that I'm in. But I find myself in a situation where it's completely banal, but it's like, okay, the amount of attention and energy that I want to put into work, that I want to put into friends, that I want to put into family, that I want to put into self-care, that I want to put into community, that I want to put into various ways that I want to make, changes and improvements in my community and my world and so forth. It's like, okay, that's that's too long a list. And it's like, well, that shouldn't, you hear the expectation coming out, but that shouldn't be too long a list.
Yeah, right. And you do have to make choices,
Sure.
and set priorities and then leave some behind for sure.
Yeah. It's one thing when I choose to play drums and I choose not to get good at guitar. It's another thing entirely when I choose to have some form of art in my life. Like, it's like, okay, the first one, pick an instrument, at least for now. But the second one, it's like, no, wait a minute. That shouldn't be hard. There should be art in your life. Of course there should.
Yeah. I mean, do you make the time for that? Do you
I do.
put art in your life?
Yeah, I do.
Are you satisfied with how much art you have in your life?
I'm dissatisfied with how hard it is to fit it in.
Yeah. So dissatisfied because like you feel like you're not ultimately getting enough. Like you'd rather, you know what I mean? Like you'd rather get more. Or what's the like?
I feel entitled to the existence that I feel I witnessed in the student that I was describing earlier. I feel like I'm entitled to having reflection time and time to knit together my various experiences and maybe even to get a little bored. And again, like, I'm not saying there isn't enough time. I'm not saying the world is doing it to me. Anyone listening to this with any experience at all knows that I'm doing it to myself, and I know that too, right? And what am I doing? I'm chasing certain achievements. I would like to be a drummer of a certain skill. I want to bring a certain level of quality to my work. I want to be a certain kind of parent. There's a lot of want. And it's not even wanting the latest doodad, right? Like the wants that I'm talking about, I don't know, feel, God, I hate to say this, but sort of more I don't know, worthy? Maybe that's
Yeah.
incredibly judgmental.
That's a great question.
I don't know, but
No, it's a really important word. I mean, because I mean, worthy from whose point of view? Let's
sure.
start there.
Yep, that's a good point. Yep. Well, yep.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think some of these habits are get baked in, from an early age, and I still have lingering ones too,
Sure.
where like, if I get to the end of the day and I have my projects and I didn't make much progress on my long-term projects for that day, at the end of the day, it's like I just, crawl into bed and I'm like, ugh, I didn't have as good a day as I wish I had. I didn't get as much done today as I wish I had. Like that feels like that's lingering older stuff for me. You know what I mean? Just like the sort of like achiever of yore. There's another part of me because I've had like the luxury of being able to sort of like reset myself in a way,
Over the last couple of years.
In the last couple of years, especially, and like, and part of that too, but like, especially in the last couple of years, that is able to look around me and say, I like the roof over my head. I like the students that I have. I like the kind of work that I'm doing. I wish I could figure out a way to read a little bit more. I'm reading some. I would like to read a little bit more. I like my friends. I like the relationships I'm developing. Most of the work I'm doing is great. I'm learning how to say no to the stuff that I probably should say no to.
All right.
And
yeah.
all of that put together leaves me feeling, as we were talking about at the very beginning, contented. You know what I mean? Like I'm pretty freaking content, which feels so, luxurious and amazing. But to me, it's got a little bit of a disconnect from the worthiness. I was watching Rick and Morty last night, and like that show, it's so clever sometimes.
I love that show. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was season 3, episode 2. If it wasn't that one, it was season 3, episode 1. If you want to look back, but there was a quote in it basically about achievement, and like whether you pursue a goal, and the description of like the person who doesn't achieve anything great is like you're just a random mass of free floating, molecules that doesn't make a meaningful impact on the molecules around it or something like that. You know what I mean? And it's interesting to frame it up that way because then it's like, yeah, well, who cares, And I'm definitely not saying don't try, but I would say like, find the goals that are right for you. Now, the challenge with that, and the challenge to me, if I were a parent right now, is that like, that's not what colleges really want to hear, You know what I'm saying? Like that's not the like. Here and there they want sort of like a free spirit, independent kid, but not like, but they more want the kid who gets like amazing grades and test scores, Yeah. I had this one student a number of years ago now, much beloved kid of mine. We really had to work to get him through school, and he's like very, very, very clever, incredibly talented musician, wonderful writer, really, truly a wonderful writer. Even when I met him at age probably 15 or 16, just like, writing essays that would like literally make me cry. And we got him into St. John's, the great book school, as the sort of independent free spirit he was, the same one who had failed algebra. I think it was algebra 1. That's when I got called in. Yeah. Anyway, we helped him hit the marks of like getting better grades, finishing his assignments on time, all that stuff. It took a lot of work. And then he gets into St. John's and fails out first semester, because like he wasn't an academic. He didn't want to read. I mean, he likes to read, but he doesn't want to be like told when to read and what to write afterwards, and he just wasn't really cut out for it. So like,
all right.
I'm just thinking about the sort of like the needs we have from the outside, you know what I mean, that the colleges place on the kids, where it's like, here are the marks you're supposed to hit, go, now hit it. And like the actual desire, like, and I think the actual desire to do something, to me, it's rarer, the actual goal of like, I'm going to make the world a better place. Like, a lot of people have that goal, and I have that goal. But my way of getting at making the world a better place is very much interpersonal, and in ways that like they haven't made prizes for. So I don't need a prize, I don't, like, if you have one for me, cool. If it comes with a cash component,
You'll deposit
cooler.
the check. Yeah, sure.
But like, I don't know. I think that like the ambition to do something is great. I want to let you come back to that, but I want to actually dial way back to the title of this podcast, because I think that like we kind of jumped over an assumption that both of us are making, and that other people may have heard, probably did hear, but I think is like essentially the central issue here is basically like, does achievement cost too much? Are we sacrificing too much for it?
Yeah.
What's the right amount? How do we invest in ourselves and in that process? And the thing the answer I haven't given is basically yes, because our intentions at that, our way of aiming at that is skewed,
Yeah, that feels very true to me. I want to throw out the idea that
Yeah.
I think you're right that oh God, any word I pick is going to be loaded. The sort of the internally motivated desire to do a thing is not so common, right? It's the human condition to want to spend a fair bit of your time just sort of farting around. And I've said, like, farting around is actually good, right? Reflection and sort of integrating various bits of learning, but left to our own devices, what are we going to do? We're going to catch up on Netflix and not actually spend it doing, serious reflection beyond the first few hours or whatever. And so assuming that's a fair brush to paint humanity with, it makes a certain amount of sense that we would engineer a society where everyone feels pressure to produce, even if it's not internally motivated. It makes sense that, I don't feel driven to do a thing, but I can plug in and do my job for 8 hours or whatever it is, and I can still contribute meaningfully to society in some way. I'm not condoning it. I'm just saying there's a certain intellectual plausibility there.
Yeah, say more about that intellectual plausibility. Like, what's the...
It seems if our world were one of those gigantic video games where your job is to control all the little people running around, SimCity or like whatever the heck the latest version of that is, right?
Okay.
Then it makes sense to me that as you approach the game, 3/4 of the people are going to be sitting around watching TV. And so you're gonna make some rules in the game that are gonna cause people to get up off their couch and like walk around their neighborhood and talk to their neighbors and go to a factory and make stuff, and go to a classroom and teach stuff and go to a hospital and heal people, like whatever it is, right? You're gonna get people busy. And and so it's not so unreasonable to me that of course it's gonna come up that we're going to build a system where everyone feels motivated to do that stuff. And of course, it's going to lead to sort of internally bad outcomes on the margins, or maybe even not even on the margins, right? People are going to feel driven. They're going to feel anxiety around it. It's going to lead to some actual, and there have to be some bad outcomes. Otherwise, there's nothing for people to be scared of. I mean, I'm speaking in a very dark way about the system that we have set up, of course, but it's... What I hear you saying is it's a good idea for people to be motivated intrinsically, and I'm in strong agreement with that. And it makes sense to me that those who fear that relying on intrinsic motivation is going to result in everything kind of just decaying, it makes sense to form some extrinsic motivation as well. And I think we all feel that fear from time to time. And generally speaking, we don't trust ourselves to have intrinsic motivation be sufficient. And maybe we're right not to trust ourselves. I don't know. But boy, is it a powerful stance to recognize there is some mix of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation causing me to do the things that I'm doing. And maybe I want to alter the balance there and not leave it in the hands of my environment to determine it for me.
Yeah. That's, I mean, that balance is the thing that is the goal. I mean, that's the, I don't know, like, I think as we move through childhood, like when you start as a child, like you're not entitled to any intrinsic motivation. You know what I mean? Although actually, I take that back, because I was going to say, when you're 5 years old or whatever, you get sent to kindergarten, and then you don't really get a choice. You just do it. You just go.
Okay. Yeah.
You're walked out to the bus stop. But we do have intrinsic motivation even from before then. Like when you're a baby, when you're hungry, you cry. You know what I mean? And you're basically like, I need this. So I think that we always have that, but then we start to like kind of take it away, and like retract it from people as they enter kind of various stages, and the things that you do. Especially in like elementary school, like you're learning your ABCs. You don't know why you're learning your ABCs, like, and kids are young enough where they don't often ask that question. Like, but excuse me.
Yeah. What is this for?
Why are we learning this? Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Later on, they learn how to do that. And that's always a funny topic in math class. It's like, and why are we learning systems of equations? And the teacher like, you can come back and answer that in a second, but because it's fun, and it's I don't know. I think it's always like a rich conversation topic.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, you may say I'm a dreamer. Basically, that's kind of like where this like boils down to. And, as I'm speaking, I'm realizing it's like, oh yeah, like I'm the one who wants it all to be intrinsically motivated. I want us to all do what we, fill the needs in the world that feel good for us to fulfill. I don't know. I think that's so idealistic, but honestly, I am. I'm an idealist. I'm a romantic. So, does that make sense?
Oh yeah,
it
makes perfect sense. I'm just trying to like there are so many different frameworks that try to lock into place, as lenses to view that through. One of them is, the degree to which we can trust ourselves to do the things that we want to do. Like if I actually had total freedom, would I do anything other than binge bad movies and eat Doritos? And the fact is, yeah, there are other things that I would do, right? I would also eat too many Doritos for a while, but like, and would it be so terrible? I think probably not. And why do I have such Herculean powers of self-control? Well, no, that's the wrong question, right? It isn't like that the frame is, oh, without Herculean powers of self-control, you're going to devolve into chaos. And it's like, well, maybe not. Why don't we find out? The more I'm exposed to people's whose lives, spiral out of control and so forth, the more I can see plausible reasons for that in the environment that they're working in, and so it's easy for me to imagine that, yeah, all right, maybe I would do nothing but sit on the couch if I had nothing to get off the couch for. But as it happens, there's a lot of stuff out there, and it is intrinsically interesting. It is worth exploring just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Maybe what I'm really getting at here is that there's a lot of fear-based motivation in the work we do, and I think in the reason many people go to their jobs, whatever industry they work in. Mm-hmm. And I think there's an argument to be made that that's a necessary spice for the soup, but I don't think I would make that argument. I think I would take the other side, that it is an overused spice, it is not as needed, and that pulling works better than pushing. you know?
Say more about that metaphor, because I get the pushing part, but what's pulling?
God, I have this idea.
Who's doing the pulling? Who's doing the
God,
pulling?
I
Yeah.
have this idea. Wouldn't it be cool if someone I've never known could read the book that I'm imagining and be moved by it? That's a pull.
Okay.
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 As opposed
No, that's
to,
interesting.
gosh, I want to be a person who writes a book. I mean, there are other differences between those two, right? But it's the notion of, you know, my God, like certain subdisciplines of quantum mechanics are literally exploring the composition of the fabric of the universe. Like, I could go 36 hours without food or sleep, just trying to dive into that if I were the right kind of person in the right kind of environment, whatever. And that could be fascinating to me, you know? Or pull, right? Versus push. If I get a degree in physics from a well-regarded institution, then I'll be able to blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, or my parents will be proud of me if they can
Yeah.
tell their friends that
Sure.
I work at the Large Hadron Collider. You know what I mean?
Or even I can be proud of myself if I can tell myself that I do these things, and therefore, I am worthy, coming back to worthy pursuits.
Yeah. I mean, that's a terrific word, and I think that like another way of thinking about application of worthy is really applicable to work specifically is money, right? So like money is that's extrinsic motivation, right?
Sure.
And a lot of people for the entire 20th century, basically, and it's still mostly true today, work for the money, right? And then they take that home, and then they live the rest of their lives, enjoying that, spending that money on their family, on their, on themselves, on their kiteboarding habit, whatever.
Right. The notion that I'm going to work in order that I can have the rest of my life, that's the trade-off I'm making. Like that's
exactly.
I grew up swimming in that water.
Exactly. And that's pure extrinsic motivation. You know what I mean? Where like, even the word work is problematic because not problematic, but the concept I kind of reject because it just implies, because of our connotation of it, that like when you're working, you're going to be unhappy. You know what I mean? Like you don't go to work to have a good time, and I'm not saying, when I say a good time, I'm not talking about, Netflix and like a pint of Ben and Jerry's, which is like, yeah, that is what I want to do. Sometimes. The Stephen Colbert flavor is really good. You know what actually is really good is the
Americone
Cherry
Dream.
Garcia.
Is that the Americone Dream?
Look at you.
Ben and Jerry's. I'm right there with you, girlfriend. Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's so freaking good. Like that is a good time, but like there's so many other ways to have a good time. But I just don't like the fact that work like is an intentional, like by definition, a sacrifice of that. I think that sucks.
And sacrifice is part of the whole point of, right, the price of achievement. Like one of the things that I've always wanted to have for myself is agency in my work, because that's a shorthand for me for agency in my life, right? The notion that like I'm going to do some things that I'm intrinsically called to do in some sense, I'm pulled towards, and I'm going to create these things, and that's going to enable me to function in this world such that, right, I have food and a roof over my head and all these other things because I have done this thing that is uniquely mine that I've put out into the world. I mean, that's pretty idealistic, I would say.
I love it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like that hangs for me. Like that to me is like that. I don't know. I don't really know if you need more than that. As like an underlying sort of like philosophical principle. I don't know. We have to make compromises here and there. You know what I mean? Just to like, because you're delivering work for other people, right? Because like almost inherently, the work we do is social. That means at some point you've got to present it to somebody else, and then you've got to see if they like it or not. So there is like some, that is inherently external. Nothing wrong with that. But beyond those compromises, which I think we want to be careful not to get carried away with or by, like, I love what you said, like I don't have any feedback, no notes.
Well, I think the place I'd put your attention is that let me see if I can formulate this. It's not a question of I'm trying to get at a qualitative versus quantitative dichotomy here. Quantitative is, oh, I wish I could get more done. I wish I could have a better resume, a better college application. I wish I could get admitted to a place that is closer to the top of my personal list. I wish that I could get that raise. That's quantitative. Qualitative is, I am playing the game of trying to put things into the world that I feel pulled to put into the world, versus I am playing the game of just trying to get pushed as little as possible and still survive.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, I'm I can't help but always reflect on my own personal experiences.
Please.
When we have these conversations. When I was in high school, all I wanted to do, the only like extrinsic goal that I would tell you was that I wanted to go to Harvard. That was it, and I would tell you. But interestingly, even though that was sort of like, a goal that it's impossible to guarantee, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like it really is like, there's...
And you didn't you wound up at some crappy school in New Jersey, right?
That's correct.
Sorry, I can't help it. Go on.
That's fine. No. I mean, I think that's important to the story too, because there's another part of me that at the same time, as I was trying to get into Harvard and ended up at Princeton University.
I know, slumming it.
Really enjoyed the competitiveness and the sort of like striving, you know what I mean? Like that's its own separate thing, you know what I mean? It's like to be really good at school, which I also liked. I liked school anyway, but to like be good at it was personally satisfying, you know what I mean? So I was like playing this game with that other extrinsic motivation, but just playing the game was like good enough for me, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure if it does. Let me read it back to you through a lens that is different enough that maybe you'll help me triangulate. It sounds like what you're saying is you were playing a video game where there was a score, and the score mattered, but you were mostly playing the video game because the video game is fun, and the score is just like, it's sort of a formal goal that gives structure to the fun activity.
That's correct. Okay. Yeah, and I think it's important to see both of those things. That's my fundamental point, especially with the kid I was talking about, the mother who wants to send the kid to the Ivy League school, is like, I don't mind the ambitious goal, but the process has to make sense too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, all right. So
I don't mind you writing a book. Go write it, like totally write a book, but write it because the process of learning how to write a book and publish it yourself is going to be really rewarding, Well, and what that says to me is, again, sort of moving from black and white to grayscale, it's getting into Princeton is a lot of work, like just period. And different people will intrinsically enjoy that work more or less than others. And so if you're going to set that as a goal, make sure that it's well enough aligned with your own intrinsic motivation that you're going to experience no more than a tolerable quantity of friction along the way. That's great. That's so good, Wes. Yeah, that's a really nice summary. I like that. Yeah, that's exactly right for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and that really rings true for me too. Yeah, and the thing is, I routinely get into this, long-standing habit of seeing everything as like, am I doing it right or am I doing it wrong, black and white? When in reality, as you're pointing out, like, one way or the other, you got to pay the bills, right? One way or the other, you've got to do the thing. And there are these things that we're driven to do internally, right? Intrinsically. And we want to give those as much air as we can. And like you said, there have to be compromises. Okay, how does it all play out? Well, there are a number of different options here, and some of them are going to be better in one way than the other. and we're coming back to a thing that we come back to a lot, which is the better you understand your own value system, the better you can line your actions up with those values and goals in a way that
Right.
is going to make it feel like you get more good outcome for the effort you put in, because the goals will be more meaningful to you, and because the efforts will be more in alignment with using the skills you want to use, the strengths you want to use, learning the new things that you want to learn, and whatever.
And a note to people, because I can't help but like turn this into like a little bit of like, I don't know, like just like a sharing of philosophy that's meant to be
Yeah.
helpful, is that like you don't have to be perfect at that. You know what I mean? So like that the goal of like identifying your own values and then applying those values, in a way that like kind of works and is coherent and satisfying, that you will find that you're not doing it perfectly all the time, and that's okay.
Yes, and
Yeah.
you're saying that really helps me sort of zero in on a dissatisfaction that I have with the performative nature of college applications vis-a-vis internal goals, right? On one hand, like, I'm glad that we go through this process because it frames up the idea of, define your value system and chart a path that's in alignment with the value system. Like, that college decision process is one of the first major ways we do that, right? Then we
Yeah.
choose careers and we choose people to hang out with and all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, I'm not saying, oh, college is terrible. This decision is, like, yes, I agree that it's too early and so on. And yes, I agree that it's too consequential and there are too many, some of the stressors that go into it. Some of the inputs into the system are just totally out of whack. But at the same time, it's like, oh, right. Yeah, this is a thing that we're going to be doing for the rest of our lives. We've got to start somewhere. I'm not a big fan of the way it's currently set up, but it does make sense that something would be in that place.
Yeah.
Huh.
I think we should table it there, but before we go, we should do the thing that we never remember to do at the beginning.
Let's do the thing.
Which is introduce ourselves. And normally we introduce the other person, but let me just take the reins and quickly just introduce myself for a specific reason.
All right, I love it. Go.
So I'm Amy Dorsey, and the reason I wanted to give my own intro this time is that I, for many years have been, I still am the founder of Tutor TED, and that was my education business for a whole career. And I've recently incorporated a new business because for a long time I was sort of like debating. I was like, do I keep the business that has my dead name on it? And I was like, that's fine. It's its own thing. It's its own entity. And I decided eventually, I was like, yeah, but you know what? I need to be in love with my business and my, that entity rather than like tolerating it.
Yeah.
So I started a new business, and it's called Amie Teaches. And I think it's a better name than Tutor TED because it's just sort of like an identifier, cute, whatever. It's fine. Got the alliteration, but Amie Teaches is an action, and it tells you like what it is I do, and it really is sort of inherently in me. Like that is what I do, like for better or worse, I won't shut up about it, and I love to teach. So yeah, Amie Teaches LLC is the new business, and
I'm assuming it's amyteachers.com. Is that available yet to us?
yeah, I have the domain. I haven't put any sites to it yet. It'll be, I think the sites will just be online course, and then maybe a chance to, there'll be ways to connect with me, but
Sure.
Maybe a chance to book me online
Yeah.
for tutoring, because I'm still doing that, and I do love the tutoring. But yeah, I'm working on a GRE course right now. That's my next big project.
Oh yeah. Okay. I'd love it.
And then I think I'm gonna reboot my SAT and ACT courses under the Amie Teaches handle after I get that GRE course done.
I mean, I think that they're very high quality courses, and I think that they're very useful. So no matter what, I should, before I have a chance to forget, I should mention AMIE Teaches.
Good point. Thank you, Wes. Great point.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I really love the work that you did with those, and I think that one thing that, first of all, I just want to express that I'm really glad to hear this this new venture that you're undertaking and that you're creating, because for a while during this transition, I found myself wondering, okay, will she continue to teach? Will she become a full-time writer? Will she move in some other directions? All this kind of good stuff. And, by all means, go with God, do the thing that you're called to do. But the degree to which you've been called to help people in this way has always struck me as a particularly bright light. And so the notion that it still resonates with you after this change in identity is really encouraging to me, because I would hate to see that light just sort of, wander off over the horizon, never to be seen again.
Thank you, and that really is the reason I love the name too, because it's such a it just is a fact. You know what I mean? Like this is what it's one thing that I do, but it's a thing I love to do, and and it's sort of like intrinsically true. So anyway, that's me. I'm Amy Dorsey. Tell us about you, Wes.
I'm Wes Carroll with 2 R's and 2 L's. WesCarroll.com. I run Wes Carroll Tutoring and Coaching. There are 10 of us these days.
Wow.
Yeah, it's funny. After the last 12 months, I feel like I should almost not say what we do, because I feel like there's so much evolution at this time, and we're doing our very best to keep up with it. But what I will say is that our core specialty has always been helping middle school and high school students and beginning college students with some of the challenges that they face in their STEM education. And that includes everything from helping them learn to be better creative problem solvers, to helping them manage their time better, helping them better memorize the rafts of things they need to memorize in order to do their work. And yes, indeed, learning calculus, learning physics, learning all these different actual technical components. And I'm very proud to say that we now have not only a very deep bench of expert skills on the team, but we have continued to retain a core culture that we are not teaching things, we are teaching people. Everyone on the team has remained deeply, groundedly human in a way that I think really shows in the kind of work that we do. I'm very proud of it. I invite people to come to the website and see some of the stuff that we've done, because just as with you, Amy, I feel like it's constant reinvention, whether it's book, online course, yet another podcast or podcast episode. There are a number of projects in the works right now that ought to get published later in the this year, in the next few months, as well as in 2024. And at this point, it's not even for the sake of having the projects. It's just such a joy to do this work with these people, for the people we do it for. And I'm happy to invite people along on the ride.
That's awesome. Yeah, love that. Yeah, it's I love the human component. I've been thinking a lot about that with regard to AI.
Sure.
And just what jobs will AI replace? And it's going to be a while till AI is as good at being a human as we are. You know what I mean? As sort of
Sure.
it tries, and you can watch it, you can witness it in different iterations, and see its attempts, and it's like, oh, that's interesting, that was pretty good, but it's not there yet. You know what I mean? Especially when it comes to education. And I think that valuing, it's yeah, I'm teaching you math, and yes, I've taught this concept to 2,000 other students in the past, maybe more than that, but I'm teaching it to you from human being to human being, and that matters. I think that's just profound. So,
Yeah, I think it's really true. I think it's easy to lose track of. It's easy from a fear-based mindset to say, "Oh, well, we're gonna lean into that because that's what distinguishes us from AI." But it really isn't that. If AI gets to be as good at this thing, then okay, great, we'll find something else to do. But in the meantime, exactly. It really does. It does resonate as an important piece of the process for certain people at certain junctures, and so we're there to help.
Yeah, and if AI gets as good at it, then that's when we'll queue up the Netflix and have some Doritos and Ben and Jerry's delivered.
American dream, baby. I'm saying. So do you have
delivered by drone straight to our house?
I'm thinking. Although I am going to say, as much as I love the cookie stuff, I've always had a soft spot for Chunky Monkey.
Okay, it's funny. I can't remember. What's in Chunky Monkey?
It's banana ice cream.
Okay, good. Okay.
Chocolate,
okay.
Walnuts, and I think there's white chocolate in there too.
Yeah,
I know.
I'm not crazy about the walnuts.
It's one of those things that I have never talked to anyone who's ambivalent about that flavor. Right? Most people are like, that is just a waste of good. And I'm just like, you know what? It's just. I
feel ignorant about it right now. I will say, Cherry Garcia is freaking delicious.
Very simple, very excellent presentation. What else you got?
Yeah, I mean, I
New York
think I need
super
to try
fudge chunk?
Chunky Monkey.
Too much.
Yeah, fudge gets to be problematic for me in ice cream sometimes because the
Okay.
texture it's just a different texture.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, but you know more about ice cream than I do. I'm learning right now.
I'm not, that doesn't mean it's a good idea, but
Thank you so much for your time today, Wes. It's so fun to talk to you as always.
Amy Dorsey, I really appreciate it. And I apologize if after editing this episode you discover that we've learned very little because of my slow coming around to some of the ideas.
That's funny. My goal with these episodes, with the conversations, I'm always trying to pre-edit the conversation, which is to say, I try to make it work in one pass. So we'll find out. We'll see if it did or not. But
Fair enough.
I'm optimistic.
All right. Fair enough. Thank you. A pleasure as always, and have a great one.
Always. See you next time.
Thanks for hanging with us. Click subscribe, ring the bell, tell a friend, leave a comment. You know the drill.